Hello all, this is James Johnson, aka Sulfurblade, and I am here to talk about net neutrality. It seems net neutrality is attempting to make it into a vote in the House. What the bill says in particular, I am actually not sure of. I have not read or seen the bill. All I know is that Republican leadership in the House and our president are all aboard to keep net neutrality from happening. And I'd like to ask why our Republican politicians are so hell-bent to go against their constituency. Yes, that's right. They're not acting in the behalf of the American people. You see, there is a small percentage of Republicans who pushed through that idiot in the corners, also known as Ajit Pai, the chairman of the FCC, who repealed net neutrality earlier this year, or was it last year? Anyway, he got rid of net neutrality. He is on my top 10 biggest idiots of the decade list. Maybe the number one biggest idiot of the decade, but I don't know. There's that guy in Europe right now who's causing a whole lot of issues. What's his name? Axel Voss or something like that, who's managed to push through Article 13 and Article 11 in Europe, which, well, they're actually kind of worse than our net neutrality issues. What's our net neutrality issues? Well, our net neutrality issues are basically they affect our pocketbook. They affect our internet performance, but they do not affect our ability to use the internet. Well, they do to an extent. I mean, maybe you can't afford your ISP's monopoly-like price gouging, and so you decide to not get internet service. That's one way it could affect you, causing you not to partake in the internet because of the repeal of net neutrality. Previously, net neutrality kept ISPs from price gouging customers. They kept ISPs from throttling customers. They kept ISPs from doing many things that they shouldn't do. But since we repealed net neutrality, there's been, of course, some interesting things that have transpired. One thing, for example, CenturyLink intentionally abuses Utah law to shut down the internet and serve ads via DNS. CenturyLink, the United States' fifth largest ISP, is forcing their users to view ads using a combination of DNS hijacking and blocking of internet access. For months now, Utah Redditors have reported that CenturyLink users have noticed that their internet browsing is being interrupted in order to serve them a notice that features an ad. What's worse is if you don't view this ad notice because you aren't using CenturyLink's DNS, your internet service will actually stop working. There's reasons for doing this: ethically wrong type of ad service and improper stoppage of internet service. According to CenturyLink's notice, was that they were required to by law. This was news to all of the affected customers, and in fact also news to the politicians that created the law. Since the end of net neutrality in the United States, egregious offenses such as this have been on the rise. There's a reason that net neutrality was put in place. It was to keep stupid things like this from happening. There has been many egregious violations of net neutrality in the past, before the rules were put in place, and there have been egregious violations that have taken place since Ajit Pai decided to repeal net neutrality. An organization, the FCC, who's not elected. 5 people who are not elected have so much power as to repeal net neutrality, something that all Americans count on. And what's worse is our Republican elected officials actually believe that we, their constituents, want net neutrality to be repealed. We don't. Overwhelmingly, 75%, 3 in every 4 Republicans do not want the repeals of net neutrality. We want net neutrality put back in place. And almost all Democrats. So we're talking 100% of Democrats, 75% of Republicans. Is there a more bipartisan issue than net neutrality? I can't find one. But for some reason, our idiots who were elected to office somehow think that they're doing all of us a favor by blocking this net neutrality bill from going into the House. I think it's about time that we get on the horn with our congressmen and we tell them not to block this. That net neutrality is something that the American people are very much in favor of. So that's why I'm making this particular video, is to do something about this idiot the only way we can, and that's by bypassing the FCC and making law via the congressional bodies, which requires our elected officials to actually put forth law to be voted on, so that stuff like this in Utah doesn't happen. This here, what we're looking at here, is basically a poll showing how much in favor Republicans and Democrats are in regards to the repeal of net neutrality. This is a bipartisan issue. Most anyone you ask is not going to be, yeah, repealing net neutrality was a great thing, because we love to spend the 20 or 30 or 40 extra dollars to our ISP now. We love the fact that they can now throttle our internet and there's nothing we can do about it. We love the fact that the internet has now become completely deregulated so that big companies can run amok and do whatever they want with no regards to us, the little people. I'm sorry, but if there's something that needs to be regulated, it's the internet. There's lots of things that don't need to be regulated. In fact, I'd rather you go get rid of the speed limits on the frickin' national highways, like the freeways that have a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit on them for some unknown reason, even though there's 4 lanes of traffic all flowing in the same direction. You could get rid of speed limits on those highways, and it would have far less of an effect if you want to deregulate something than this. I would rather have regulation on the internet to make sure that us, the little people, are being protected by the big ISPs, who are monopolies at this point, than, for example, the speed limits on freeways. I don't understand the thought process here. Well, that's not true. I understand the thought process in that some Republican somewhere, and probably an older Republican in like his 60s or 70s, has been convinced that if you deregulate an industry, which, there's a lot of truth to this actually. If you deregulate an industry, it will grow faster and stronger, and there'll be more competition, and thus prices will come down, etc., etc. Well, that's all good and great with most normal industries, but the internet is not one of those. You don't have thousands of ISPs out there competing for your business. You have a couple of monopolies. The world where deregulation is good just doesn't apply to the world of the internet. And so you have to look at things from a point of view that has some sort of common sense underlying it. Do we want to deregulate the steel industry, or do we want to deregulate the farming industry? Getting rid of the silly milk cooperative laws that have been on the books for years and years that have destroyed the dairy industry inside of the United States could have been something that could have been done a long time ago that would have made lots of sense. But deregulating the internet doesn't make sense. Because the internet isn't made up of thousands of small dairies run by families. It's made up of Comcast and CenturyLink and Fox and Verizon and AT&T. And these people, these big companies that have lots of cash, and they're the only person you can turn to for your internet service because there's nobody else inside of your geographical area that you can get service from. Literal monopolies. But yet, they don't need to be regulated on their pricing. They can charge us as much as they like. They can throttle our internet as much as they want. And they can partake in shady business practices as much as they want. Because we've thrown the rules that held them to some sort of accountability out the window. And for what reason? The internet has not been a better place since the repeal of net neutrality. It really hasn't. If anything, the internet is going downhill fast, with Europe passing Article 13 and Article 11. But here in the US, we have our own little fight that we need to fight, and that's called net neutrality. And it's evidently in battle right now in Congress. So maybe we should wake up. Maybe we should call up our congressmen. Maybe we should let them know how we feel. Especially if you're a Republican. Talk to your Republican congressman and tell them, hey, I support net neutrality. So should you if you want me to re-elect you. Anyway, that's how I feel about that. I'm Jaames Johnson. This is my channel. This is my content. Hope you enjoy my content. If so, leave a like, subscribe, and until next time all, peace.